Thank you so much, Clark, and musicians, singers. So good to see you here today. We do welcome our guests, and while the choir is taking their seats, just remind you or let you know that 2 weeks from tonight we will have a one-time meeting to share one-verse evangelism. So we're trying to crank up our outreach efforts, and we've done My 316, but we want to have you to have all the tools that you can to talk to others about Christ. So one-verse evangelism, you just memorize one verse. That's kind of why the title is One-Verse Evangelism, you see. And so anyway, it'll be a good tool for you on the 24th at 4:30. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, thank you for these truths of which we've sung this morning. Thank you for the youngest singer to the oldest. And Lord, these who have led us to approach your throne as we have worshiped you this morning. And thank you for this tremendous theme, this tremendous truth that you deliver, you rescue. And I pray that you would take your word now, Lord. I pray that you would put a hedge of protection around this place, that you'd seal this place off, and that we would meet, each one of us and all of us together, we would meet with you over your word, and you'd speak the word that each one needs to hear today from your word. Oh, we pray that you'd move mightily, help us to respond and make life-changing decisions. For we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. We'll be in Psalm chapter 34 this morning, looking at one of the verses that was a part of this week, and a verse that particularly captures the theme for this week. We'll be reading Psalm 34, 15 through 19, and then focusing on verse 19. Now, VBS kiddos and workers, you're going to have to help me here, because we learned this week that when you're lonely, that's right. We learned this week that when you are worried, we learned that when you struggle, we learned that when you've done wrong, and then we've learned that when you're powerless, that's exactly right. Now, I wish that I could tell you this morning that if you would become a follower of Jesus Christ, and by the way, there are TV stations that you could turn on this morning and you would hear this, but I wish I could tell you that if you become a follower of Jesus Christ, you'll never have another problem in the world. You'd all be rich, you'd all look really good, and you'd all die in your sleep at age 110. But I can't. But I can promise you something even better. And that's what we're going to look at this morning in Psalm 34, beginning in verse 15. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord is against evildoers, to cut off the memory of them from the earth. So far we like this. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, we like verse 15 and 16. The eyes of the Lord are toward the righteous. His ears are open to their cry. The face of the Lord, and this is always in opposition when it's said this way, the face of the Lord is against evildoers, to cut off their memory from the earth. We like that, but we have to go on. The righteous cry, and the Lord hears, and delivers them out of all their troubles. Okay, we like that. We don't like the first part, or the second part about the troubles, but we like the delivery. Verse 18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And then verse 19, many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. We don't particularly like the first part of that verse. I don't. You know, if I had a loose leaf Bible, I'd take that one out. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. That's one of those promises that we prefer to pass over. But I want us to look at this morning. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. King David is writing this, and he's recapping, as he does so often, all the things the Lord has done in his life. Now, David knew what it meant to have to flee from those pursuing him to take his life. He was once pursued by Saul, and it wasn't David's fault. He hadn't done anything wrong. And Saul was trying to kill him, ruthlessly, endlessly trying to kill him. Another time, David had to flee from his own son who was trying to kill him. And David wasn't quite so blameless on that side. But let's look at this. Some of our afflictions. And what does afflictions mean? Well, you look it up, and it's a long list, and it just comes down to bad stuff. You know? Some of the bad stuff that happens in my life is my fault. It was a couple of weeks ago, our family went to White Sands in Carlsbad for the first time. How spectacular and how different those two are, right? If you look on the list on the homepage of what to take to White Sands, of course it includes water and sunscreen and hats, but it says to take sunshades. Everybody in my family took sunshades except me. It's a little bit of who I am. You gotta have such. You gotta have. No, you don't need sunshades. You need sunshades. At White Sands. My eyes were thankful the next day to be in the dark in Carlsbad Caverns. It took a few days for my eyes to feel normal again. That was my fault. It gets deeper than that in our lives, though. Sometimes the bad stuff happening in our lives is because of the consequences of our sin. Imagine you're a parent, you have a child, and they disobey, they will not do what you want them to do. Well, what do? Well, some people give them everything they want still, and you've seen the result of that. People in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and so forth. But you don't give them everything they want because they need to have loving consequences in their life so that they'll turn to follow you and to do what you know as the parent is right. And so God in his love allows consequences in my sin. In Proverbs 26:27, it says that if you dig a pit, you'll fall into it. If you roll a stone, it will roll back on you. The point of the verse is just this, that there are consequences in life. And so when I turn a hard shoulder to the Lord, when I turn against the Lord and his word and I say, I'm going this way, I don't care what you say. Well, it wouldn't be love for God to continue to bless me. No, it's his love that takes his hand temporarily off to say, I want you to face the consequences in your life so that you'll turn back to me. That's his love. So some of these things in my life are just my own fault. We make life choices. They begin as little choices, and they get bigger, and they get bigger. Danny Watley's here. He runs a tremendous ministry to the homeless here in Albuquerque. Take your young people to serve at the Rock at Noonday. And you'll see where some of those life choices, not everyone there, but a great majority, they've made life choices, and we can see drastically where that ends up. And we keep bumping our head into the wall, and we don't know why. And God says, it's because I love you, and I want you to turn back and to follow me, and I'm allowing consequences to come into your life. Sometimes it's just because of me and my sin. Some of you in this room, a room this size, some of you don't know Christ as your Savior. And so that's where you've got to start today. And that's the great message that Jesus does rescue on the cross. That God, before the beginning of time, knew that I would sin against him, knew that you would sin against him. And he knew the only possible way for you to know him and for you to spend eternity with him, because we're all going to die. It's eternal life that begins here on this earth and continues on after we die. The only way that could be possible if someone without sin were to die in our place. So he left the glories of heaven. He died in my place, in your place, on the cross. And in a number of minutes, we'll have an invitation. And for some of you today, the way that you are to respond to God, the way that God in his love is asking you, pleading with you to respond to him, is to come and to receive, some for the first time, what Jesus did for you on the cross, that he would rescue you from having to pay for your sin forever. And so for some of you in this room, the reason things aren't working out is because you don't know Christ. And God knows that he needs to let there be consequences, let you hit dead ends, so that you would come to him. We're on this parent and children theme. I have had 8. I have 7 mouths to feed besides my wife and I in our house. And so you might run all around the outside of our house during dinner time And in truth, we'd feed you. But just pretend with me here. And we might say, I'm sorry, we can't feed you. Your last name's not Cooksey. That's not true. We'll feed you, okay? So don't let the word get out. The pastor said you could run all around his yard. He wouldn't feed you if he had to. That's not what I'm saying. Your problem is that you're not a Cooksey. Some of you, your problem is that you're not a child of the Lord yet. But he's died to pay for it so you can. And you're hearing about it. If never before, you're hearing about it today so that you can come to know him. Some are our fault. Some are not our fault. Look at Job. God called him a blameless man who turned away from evil. I mean, Job was an amazing man of God. And yet everything that you could imagine happened to Job. His health, his family, his possessions. He lost everything. And he hadn't done anything wrong. Now, that doesn't make a lot of sense to us. The feeling part of me doesn't like that. But God was glorified through Job. And it wasn't Job's fault that he had affliction. Those are the ones that are more difficult for us. When we really come before God and we say, God, it's best I know. I'm following you. Oh, I'm not perfect, but I'm following you. And I don't know where this has come from. Those are the ones that are hard. But it's promised to us that many are the afflictions of the righteous. The story from Corrie Ten Boom and her life, the Tim Boone family, if you're not familiar with their story, they were in a German concentration camp in Ravensbrück, Germany. They were there because they had been hiding Jews in Holland, trying to save them from the Holocaust. They were sent to the camps there, and Corrie and her sister Betsy were in one of the camps with 10,000 other ladies. Horrible, horrible conditions. Horrible torture, malnutrition, and all of these things. And so Betsy was teaching a Bible study one day. And this lady raised her hand, and she took the bandages off of her mangled fingers, and she held her crooked fingers up, and she said, "Did your God will this? I was the first chair violinist in the symphony orchestra. How could God do this?" And there was silence. No one knew how to answer. Until Corrie stepped forward and she said, "We can't answer that question, but we can know this, that Jesus, who was God, who deserved nothing but glory forever and ever and ever, left the glories of heaven, came to this earth to die in my place on the cross and to die in your place on the cross." That is the answer. And sometimes that's the only answer. As Henry Blackaby used to say, that we would look at life with cross-shaped glasses. That when those things happen to us that we can't explain, we put on our cross-shaped glasses and we say, "God, I don't know why you would allow this. But you have. But if you would die on the cross for me, if you would leave the glories of heaven and die in my place, I know you love me." And God will allow us to trust him one more day. I don't like this next statement, but it's true. Joy and happiness don't come from the absence of pain, but from the presence of the Lord. I mean, I don't like that. I'm like anybody else. I want the absence of pain. But it is the presence of the Lord that gives us true joy, true happiness. That's what gets the Christian through. We ought to be the ones who have the most joy in spite of what's happening in our life. And as I look across this congregation, I see instances where that's true. I see those who are going through some of the most difficult things in this room, and they do have the most joyous testimony for the Lord. And God is using that. Praise the Lord. But sometimes we believers are the most sour people on the block. We're the most sour people in the office. And people say, whatever they've found, I don't want it. Because when we go through what they are going through, sometimes those who don't know Christ are going through it with more joy from somewhere than we are. And the Christian ought to be the one who isn't saying, "I'm so happy that I'm going through this, but I found something, someone to get me through." Many are the afflictions of the righteous. You know, it's a truth that we have to cling to, that nothing enters our life unless God allows it. That doesn't mean I understand all of it. It may be because of my sin, and God allows consequences in my life to bring me back to him, and it may be for reasons that only God knows, in ways that he wants to strengthen me. But even in Job's case, if we go back and look at the story, nothing came into Job's life that God didn't allow. Because God works all things together for good to those who love the Lord and are the called according to his purposes. Now that's a neat little promise until you're going through a difficult time. And then it becomes something that you cling to with both hands. But nothing comes into my life except for God allowed it, caused it, you choose your word. But he's sovereign over all. Ray Comfort tells the illustration, two men get on an airplane. They're both given parachutes. The first man is given a parachute and he's told, "Sir, if you'll wear this parachute in this flight, it will make your flight experience much better." So he puts the big bulky parachute on and he makes his way to his seat, and it's not comfortable to have a parachute behind you trying to sit down, but after all, the lady said it was going to make his flight more comfortable. Well, the seats are too small. And then the stewardess comes by and we'll make it a he. The steward comes by and he spills coffee on the man's lap. And it is hot. And it doesn't feel good. And eventually he takes the backpack off, and the parachute, and he throws it on the floor. He said, "That didn't make my flight more comfortable at all." But the second man is given a parachute. And this time, the steward or the stewardess says to him, "Sir, put this on, because at any moment, this flying metal can could plummet to the earth from 30, 40,000 feet, and if so, you're going to need this parachute." Well, the man sits down, and he's got the bulky parachute, just like the other man, and he sits down in the seat, and it's uncomfortable, just like the other man, and the same steward spills coffee in his lap, and it's just as hot. But he doesn't throw the backpack off, because he didn't put it on to have a more pleasant flight. He put it on because he might need it to save his life. And so I wish that I could promise you, you become a follower of Jesus Christ, and every day is going to be rosy. But that's just not what the Bible says. But we don't throw the parachute of faith in Jesus Christ off because we didn't put it on with the promise of a perfect life. We put it on because God says, "Many are the afflictions of the righteous," but the second half of the verse is, "But he delivers him from them all." Hebrews 12:15 reminds us, "See to it that no one comes short of the grace of God. And by it a root of bitterness springs up, and with it many are defiled." When we forget this truth, that yes, the afflictions are many, but God is there even more so, if you will, during those times, then we're able to receive the grace of God to go on to the second half of the verse, that God is somehow, even if it's not until heaven, going to deliver me from this. And so therefore I can have his grace to not become a bitter person who infects many with my bitterness. And have you not seen it? Bitter person who assumes everyone's done them wrong. Everyone, including God, has done them wrong and they deserve better. And the bitterness spreads like a cancer. But instead we go to this, the Lord delivers him out of them all. The psalmist says over in Psalm 119 several things like this. He says, "Before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word." He said, "It is good for me that I was afflicted." I feel like the old Fonzie, that you can't say that. It was good for me that I was afflicted. That's not good English in America. But he says that I may learn your statutes. He also says, "You have dealt well with your servant." How can he say that when he's afflicted? I mean, how can he really say that? I can say that in connection class. I can say that in Bible study. I can say that from the pulpit, the Sunday school answer, if you will. But how in his heart of hearts can he say, "God was good to me through the affliction"? Well, many of you know how he can say that. Because he went through it trusting in God rather than pushing God away. Clinging to God's grace and his mercy and his power. And just like your children learned this week, in every single possible scenario, to know that Jesus still somehow rescues. Sometimes he rescues in ways we can see. There are those of you in this room who have been healed of cancers. You have been brought back to life when it looked like you were going to die. You've seen relationships that were just trashed beyond hope that God's put back together. You can see that sometimes, how he rescues. But sometimes you don't see it until you stand with him in heaven's glory. But the promise is true. He rescues the way that he knows is best. Our second son, many of you know, our second son died. He was a heart baby. And he lived a month in the hospital. And there was someone who came to see us in the hospital from our church there in Texas. And she had a child who was in a very difficult, lifelong illness. And she said something to me that I didn't want to hear. But she was right. Because we were praying for a miracle, like you should when your baby's in the hospital. But she said, sometimes the miracle is to accept it with faith. Now, I didn't like that she said that day. But she was right. That sometimes is the miracle that God is using, because really it's all about His glory. It's bigger than my personal pleasure. Even though I don't like that, if I can just be honest with you. But for His glory, sometimes He's using the pain in our lives in ways we could never, ever imagine. There was a little girl who came to Christ in that month because our son was in the hospital. I learned things that month that I never would have learned any other way. I would love to have just read about them in someone else's story. But I learned about God that week or that month. I learned that the depths of my pain are not nearly as deep as His love and His presence and His mercy and His grace. There have been other things in my life, nothing like what you've gone through. But it's in those times that I learn about faith. You see, it doesn't take faith to get through easy times. It doesn't take faith when I can explain what's going to happen next. It doesn't take faith when I know the answer. It takes faith when I can't see what's going to happen. And it's in those times we learn about the Lord. The psalmist said, it was my affliction that led me to the Word. And sometimes that's what it takes for us to really dig deep in the Word. It's the Word that tells us about God and His nature. It's the Word that helps us to interpret the experiences we're going through. It's the Word that gives us all that we need. But you've got to believe the Word, or you're hopeless in those times. 1 Timothy, Paul tells Timothy, he says that you have got to reject all of these doubts. You've got to reject all the things. He says, so that you may instruct certain men not to teach strange doctrines, nor pay attention to myths and endless genealogies, which give rise to mere speculation. What I think. So often we base, not just in pain, but in every part of life as Christians, we still base everything on what I think and feel. Feelings are not a good thing to base things on. In our personal life, in the church, and on and on. He says, mere speculation. Rather, this is what you need, Timothy, rather than furthering the administration of God, which is by faith. Because it's when we don't understand that we have to have faith. It was Daniel in the lion's den. He was going through affliction. I've never been in that situation. But God used it, and He's still using it today. Now, a few thousand years later, was his friends Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego who were in the fiery furnace. I mean, that's an affliction. Last time I looked, bad stuff is when you're thrown into really, really hot fire. But God delivered them, and He's still using that story in my life today. Moses and his people stood before the Red Sea, and they were sunk. The Egyptian army was coming to slaughter them. And God split the sea in two, and they walked across on dry land. God delivered them. And He's still using that today. And God is using your pain in ways that you have no idea. Some of them you'll know, some of them you may never know. What did James say? He said to consider it all joy, my brethren. Another one you can't say that in American Christian grammar. Consider it, think of it as joy when you encounter various trials. Brothers and sisters, when I encounter trials, my flesh is saying, get me out. But God uses those things to draw me close to Him. Many are the afflictions of the righteous. So then the question comes back, are you the righteous? Because for the believer, we have the promise and the truth that no matter what happens to us on this earth, this short, very short, stay on the earth, it's all going to be taken care of when we get to heaven. And between here and there, we have God to walk with us through every trial, through every deep despair. But if you don't know Christ as Savior, I mean, friend, how many times do I sit with believers who have lost a loved one, who've gone through some tragedy, and we say to each other, how do people who don't know Christ get through this? And we have that question for you. Aren't you ready to stop trying to do this on your own and come to Christ today so that he will walk with you through the pain in this life and that you will be with him forever and ever? Many of the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. But you've got to be in the righteous. And to be in the righteous doesn't mean you get real good all of a sudden, because none of us are, but that you come to Christ. In just a moment, we'll have a time of invitation. And for some of you, again, today, what you need to do, the first step for you is to come and say, I don't know this God. I believe in him. I think he's there, but he doesn't live inside of me. I've never come to know him. And if he loves me that much, I want to come to know him personally. I'm tired of just being religious and believing there's a God and going to church. I want him to live in my heart because of what he did on the cross. And I'm praying that you'll do that in just a moment. Some of our children this week have decided that. And you children may need to grab mom and dad or somebody else by the hand and say, I want to go make public what I've done this week in believing for the first time in Christ. Or some of our children who believed in Christ have said, I already knew Christ, but I need to follow him in believer's baptism. I need to go up here to take the very first step of going public in my Christian faith. And baptism doesn't save us. Baptism is a picture of what Christ has done for us on the cross. The story goes, a man fell into a pit and he couldn't get himself out of the pit. A subjective, sympathetic person came by and he said, I feel for you down there in that pit. An objective man walked by and he said, it's only logical that someone would fall into a pit. The Christian scientist came by and said, you just need to stop thinking that you're in the pit. The Pharisee came by and said, only bad people fall into pits. The mathematician came through, and maybe he worked at Sandia Labs. He calculated how he could have fallen into the pit. The reporter wanted an exclusive interview from down in the pit. The Calvinist said, you had no choice. You had to fall in the pit. The non-Calvinist said, you had a choice, and you still fell in the pit. The charismatic said, just confess that you're not actually in the pit. The realist said, no, that's a pit. The geologist told him to appreciate the rock strata down in the pit. The IRS wanted to know if he was paying taxes on his pit. The county employee came by to find out if he had a permit for his pit. The evasive person, of course, just avoided the subject altogether. The self-pitying person said, you've seen nothing until you've seen my pit. The optimist said, well, things could be worse. The pessimist said, things will be worse. But Jesus, he went down into the pit and he brought the man out. Because Jesus rescues. He rescued me. I grew up in church. I knew all the stuff about God. But I didn't know Christ until I was 16. And God worked in my heart and helped me to see that I was headed to hell. But that's not what he wanted for me. He loved me so much. He had come down into my pit, died in my place, and brought me out. And I invite you today to let Jesus rescue you from wherever it is that you found yourself today. Let's pray.